Ladies and gentlemen, I want to warmly welcome every one of you to our event, Cybersecurity from Theory to Practice. It's great to see so many of you here again, and I hope you are excited for this great evening and this very interesting topic. So, who are we? We are called the Series A Science Association, and our main goal is to bring people together at events like this here and to make them work on collaborative projects and to exchange ideas and to grow their collective knowledge. So who are we? We are students, tech enthusiasts, software developers, mathematicians, entrepreneurs, and the list goes on. We want to bring people from everywhere together to work together and to share the knowledge and to learn from each other. That's our main purpose. So how do we do that? Our main thing are events, like this year. We want to have a topic and bring lots of people into the same room, listen to interesting speakers, talking about their experiences in the field and sharing their knowledge. And so we can all together at the end talk about it and learn from each other. The first event you can see here on the left side was our kickoff event. It was about discovering artificial intelligence. We had two very interesting companies talk about how they use artificial intelligence today, and two students talked about their projects in AI and how that might transform our future. And on the right side, you can see our latest event, which was also hosted here. It was about quantum computing. We had a very cool speaker from IBM here, Elisa Bäumer, who taught us how to practically program quantum computers already and how the future might look with them. We also want to have the practical part, so we organize workshops as well. That one here is at Grand Garage, where we had 4 interesting workshops about very different topics, ranging from hardware programming up to one workshop was called refactoring, and we also had just very different topics to bring people from all fields together. And here just another few pictures of the networking sessions, and of course there's food and drinks always, so we can enjoy the evening together. So if any one of you is now interested, or maybe you have a topic already you want to present or just work with other people together on a project and want to learn from each other, just follow us. The QR code leads to our Discord server where you can connect with like-minded people, and all the information about our association, all the upcoming events, etc. is on our website, crxa.at. And with that, I want to give the stage to Matthias Heiden, who will lead us through the evening.
Thank you, Alex. So, organizing events like this wouldn't be possible without our partners. And we want to express a big thank you to 5 Square, who share our vision and support us. They're working with many very exciting technologies, ranging from cloud to artificial intelligence. And they also have some really interesting projects, like the early detection of epilepsy, or they're also working on a large language model that could potentially replace ChatGPT. We would also like to thank the Open Innovation Center for providing us this amazing location and supporting us while organizing this event. They prepared a short video that explains what exactly they do. All right, big thank you to them again. And let's come to our schedule. So we have 3 very exciting talks lined up. And Professor Rass will give you an introduction to security research from his standpoint. Then Tobias Höller will introduce us to capture the flag competitions. And lastly, Martin Dallinger will talk about these capture the flag competitions and how they compare to and how they're actually done in the real world and how real world differs to these challenges. And with that out of the way, let's give Professor Rass a big applause.
Okay, welcome today. Truly my pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. Not actually very long yet at the JKU. I came in 2021 here as a newly appointed professor for secure systems, previously working on cryptography, more or less general system security, and have slowly evolved into more general system security rather than crypto. So I actually started off in the more narrow sense of security and broadened my field before I came here. And what I particularly enjoy about the JKU is this really is an exceptional place. And believe me, I've been in many universities before as a visitor or along more than almost 2 decades of research. So I do have a bit of experience collected over the time, and to believe me, one thing that JKU is in this sense really an exceptionally open-minded, open space for discussions and with wonderful people that I haven't met across the last decade anywhere else. And with that, again, it's much of a pleasure to give you a bit of an insight back and forth, let's say, my personal experience on security research, what brought me to the field originally, the lessons that I have learned, some have been harder than others, and what I think I can give you as, let's say, recommendations if you personally are aiming or looking into or thinking about a career in research, in particular about security. I guess the long story short, it's unbelievably fun, at least the security field. You can do lots of things that are just amazing, and you also get paid for. You even get paid for that. So when I was asked by my friends, like, how do I like my job, and I'm more or less often replying, I don't really have a job. I have a hobby that I get money for. And security is actually very much like that. So what brought me into that field originally is actually my double training, because I found it hard to decide between different studies when I was coming out of school. So there was lots of things that were interesting me, and I took a choice between computer science and math. And I actually never took the choice. So I did both studies in parallel, which ended up in a double training. So I couldn't decide actually until I was submitting my master thesis. So I submitted 2 of them. So I'm actually a computer scientist and a mathematician by training. But again, please don't be shy because of that. I'm much less evil than that might suggest. The problem, if you do such a double degree, actually, as nice as it is to have 2 master degrees in front of your name, you're not actually declared what you are. So you're a computer scientist or a mathematician, and it remained unclear to people. And so I thought I need to find some field where I can actually play both of my interests, and that is actually system security. So system security is a wonderful combination where I can just enjoy myself as a mathematician or enjoy myself as a computer scientist, no matter what I'm actually into at the moment. I can do it all under the umbrella of security, and with various fields that I've been touching over the years. Most recently is artificial intelligence, and there's also cryptography, from which I started off. And there is general system security that combines more or less pretty much everything with everything. But artificial intelligence is one of my current research topics. Crypto is one of my past research topics. I really enjoy doing crypto very much. But I personally don't think that this is actually where the real problems are. Crypto is extremely strong. It's not the weak part in many systems. So the much more fun thing to look into is actually artificial intelligence. But I'm actually here on the dark side of the force. I do enjoy AI very much, but only because we can make it incredibly stupid by very small variations to the fields. So what makes me interested in security in particular is that it more or less is very central and touches very many other fields. Like there is hardware design, where it is actually has relations to, relations to legal aspects, like with the GDPR, for example. It touches business processes. It comes into psychology, because the most successful attacks are actually not the ones technologically working. There is a proverb: only amateurs target the technical system, the proficients target the human. Which I also know from the horse's mouth, because I have been working with people from the Austrian intelligence agencies, and believe me, meeting these people is not only cool if you're in the cinema. They're kind of creepy guys in real life. And but still, we need them, and I'm glad to have them, and I'm glad that people are doing jobs which wouldn't let me sleep over the night, so I can confine myself to the much more fun part of security. But there is also computing architectures that it has relations to. We heard about quantum quantum computing, which does have its impact on security. But again, no offense against quantum computing. The security people aren't really concerned about quantum computers, because except for RSA and El-Gamal-based encryption, almost nothing is in real threat about the form of quantum computers. So those are the only two examples. What I do in particular in security is game theory and decision theory. And just to not get you onto the wrong track here, game theory has nothing to do with computer games. Mostly because I am zero talented in computer games. The last that I have really beaten was Super Mario Brothers, the Game Boy version. So I don't have any talent in computer games. But again, I'm a mathematician by training, so game theory is actually a subfield of optimization, and optimization of interests that are opposing, which is adversary versus defender, which brings in lots of interesting games that you can play mathematically about breaking into a system. And one that we have been looking into recently were mathematical models of capture the flag. We didn't call it like that, we were calling it cut the rope, but more or less it is really a mathematical version of a capture the flag competition that we were applying for stealthy intrusions. And I'm going to show you that in a few minutes what I mean roughly by this. So security as a field of research has a bit of an unfortunate fate, because on the bright side, as I already said, it's unbelievably fun. So you can do good things and bad things, and depending on which you enjoy more, you can be the defender, you can be the attacker, and you can all do it under the umbrella of security. And it's cross-sectional. It's a very cross-sectional discipline. So it combines lots of different ideas from different fields, which I personally enjoy very much. And what's also good about it, everyone has a need for it. So whenever you talk to people, people may think that, but there is actually no person that can really argue, I don't have a need for security. Security is even one of the 5 very basic needs and demands of human beings themselves, besides 4 others that I can't remember because I'm not a social science person. But if you have the Pavlov pyramid, security is in there, much unlike the blockchain, for example. The bad about security is, and that's really the practical bad side, it doesn't generate revenue. Instead, it costs money, and it just prevents losses. So you take a small loss to prevent a bigger loss. That's very hard to sell to business people. And that's actually really one of the main reasons why security isn't wider adopted as it is, and why we're still in strong need of people actually doing capture the flags, because that's what you can show to people. See, well, this is not a theoretical possibility. We can break into your system. Actually, we did so. So just to show people what can happen and what security can actually do for them, because security has really the bad fate. You won't notice it. You will notice it when it hasn't worked. It's like with your health. Talk to any person from the medical domain. People just expect that they are healthy. The value of your health comes to your awareness when you're no longer healthy. And you don't go to the doctor when you're healthy, unless you really like him. The ugly about security, and that's what's particularly coming out of my personal experience, the line between what we have as a civilization in modern society and the medieval ages is dramatically thin. We are depending on critical infrastructures, and the term critical means we cannot live without them. Energy is one of the basic supplies that is easy to imagine. Problem is, if we would have no electricity, the least of our problems is that we wouldn't have lights. Much more of an issue is that the heating system won't work. Well, in summer we can deal with that. However, what's also no longer working is your toilet flush. So whenever there is a power outage, you might light up a candle to get light. You might not need a heating, but I'm very sure you're going to need the toilet within a couple of hours. And unless you're really very close to your family, you will have to find a solution so that you can flush exactly once, and there will no more water coming up because the pump runs on electricity. And that's one of the really bad things because of the implications. Because if the wastewater system breaks down because of electricity outage, we have pandemics against which Corona is like a birthday party. So that's kind of the bad thing about security. We're much more depending on that than we might realize. And critical infrastructure security, which is what I'm working in, let me put it like that. I have learned lots of things. I would have preferred to learn much less about what's possible, and I'm not sleeping very well because of some things that I took away from the meetings, which is why I'm actually not telling you about this for this evening, because I still want this to be enjoyable. But still, security is more critical than many, many other things. And the other bad thing about it, you cannot achieve 100% security. That's unattainable. No matter what people would like to believe, no matter how much people would actually buy into technology, the best you can do is a best effort, and that's it. And then hope that someone else is the easier victim than yourself. And what's also surprised some people, and I'm surprised that they are surprised, is that we do have a perfectly working ecosystem related to cybercrime. So you don't need to be a hacker on your own. You can buy all that stuff on the darknet as long as you know how to handle bitcoins, because that's the primary currency on the darknet. So if you want to hack somebody, you don't need to write the malware. You can approach your software vendor to give the malware to you. There is licensing, as you know, from other software vendors as well. You don't need to run the infrastructure, because running a botnet is really kind of an investment. You don't need to buy these computers yourself. You can have somebody else run the botnet for you. You don't need to be a specialist in offshore accounting at the Bermuda Islands. There is a friendly money mule who does it for you, or the money laundry. You don't have to watch lots of TV to learn how to do money laundry. There is people doing that for you against a small fee, and everything that you can imagine. There is even Amazon-like shops for cyber criminal activity, whatever you like, with very much the same working style as you know from real-life Amazon. So there is stars, customer ratings, there is customer bonus programs. You get discounts if you're coming back as a customer. You can blackmail those people. I won't give you a 5-star rating unless you give me something on top of my bill, and lots of other stuff. So that's a cyber criminal ecosystem. And what I learned recently is that since this is all illegal, let me say the competition amongst these online shops is, let me say it, a bit harder than in real life. So, because one of the things you can buy there is really a denial of service attack. And according to best practices, of course, they're testing their products on one another. So the shops are actually hacking and attacking themselves mutually. also blackmailing, and the good thing about it is none of them can really go to the police to so this actually is sort of a self-regulating mechanism inside, which is at least good news from our perspective, because we're still on the good side of the force. So a personal sample of what I do in research. First is security of artificial intelligence. There is lots of work on how to make trustworthy AI, because there is biases in the data that we can get out of that. And what interested me in this particular use case was people are only looking at the data and never looking at the algorithm. And I was trying to play around with the algorithm. Remember, I'm a mathematician, so I'm really I'm not afraid of the formula. So I was playing around with the algorithm with very nice results, actually. Not touching any data, but being able to drive the artificial intelligence into any result that I like. There is computations under the cover of privacy, how you can encrypt data that is otherwise protected, which is like fully homomorphic encryption and all those buzzwords. One of the reasons why I'm not doing intensive research on crypto is because I was actually showing at one talk how inefficient that still is practically, and that's when crypto people stopped liking me. I'm also going into model-based security and critical infrastructures. I was touching that already briefly. Then there is risk management, because people do have scarce resources. We don't want to invest money into security because, again, that doesn't give us any revenue. It also doesn't give us any pleasure. So, but still, we do need to invest some resources, and the cheapest way of doing that is a question of optimization. And for crypto, and again with the quantum computer in foresight, I'm also looking into, can we really emulate public key crypto with symmetric cryptography? And that also works well in combination with game theory somehow. Good thing is, almost all of the symmetric crypto counts as post-quantum secure. So all that the symmetric crypto people have to do is double the key length, and the quantum computer is effectively useless, which is nice. So security of artificial intelligence, and that came out of a research project that we were having with the ministries. We were asking them to give us a model of their infrastructure that we can play around with to simulate terrorist attacks on it. And they just responded, how about no? Because actually, we're saying, well, we don't need the whole energy grid. We're just taking part of it. No, it was still no. And we say, well, we do have some powerful artificial intelligence, so can we build a digital twin? Answer was perhaps yes, if you get the data. Okay, then that went back and forth. Ended up with the data not being given, because people were actually concerned, if we would train their data into an artificial intelligence model, can we get back the data from the artificial intelligence model? Like a large language model wouldn't be as that size, but still, could we get the data back? And that was actually an interesting research question that's known as the model inversion problem. And point was, our question was, can we get back the data from an artificial intelligence model? The answer is no. It's not protected in the same sense as crypto, but what we could prove, and that's what was actually very nice, we took an artificial intelligence model and logistic regression, for example. By the way, that's one of the models that would be applied if you go to your bank and ask for a credit loan. So what these guys apply is actually logistic regression. So they fill in a form, they plug in the values in some variables, the model pumps out the value between 0 and 1, and if that's below some or above some threshold, you get the loan or you don't get it. What we could do is, we took any such model, and that came out of a random number generator. We trained that model to data that we have, and we took a random sample of completely unrelated data out of the random number generator and constructed the training method such that it reproduced exactly the model in our possession. So if that was the given data, which encodes, let's say, customer information somehow, we could actually retrain exactly the same model from artificial data that has nothing to do with the customer data. Conversely, we could argue that whatever data you think one could get from the AI model, I can draw something from the random number generator and show and even demonstrate I could have trained exactly that model from exactly that data, and that has nothing to do with you. So it's plausible deniability. Whatever you get as a result, I can deny it was a result, but it's not yours. It's not the right. And that is repeatable, and it works without touching any of the data. We just need the model that we want to have. We take any data, and we can retrain exactly that model from exactly the data that we like. That works on logistic regression. That works on neural networks, which is, in the simple feed-forward case, just a couple of nested logistic regression models. But we could actually do that quite well and efficient. That was supervised learning. So we had the same question, would that also work for unsupervised learning? Let's say you're going for a kidney donation. Well, maybe kidney is not a good thing, but you're going for a credit loan and you get rated as among the group of people who actually are eligible for a loan, or you're not eligible for a loan. And long story short, yes, we could manipulate clustering algorithms equally well. So what we took there is we took 10 points, just two-dimensional, so we could plot them. Up to 4 dimensions, it becomes difficult on 2-dimension to plots. So we were taking 10 points, we were assigning random classes, so the classification here is just 1 to 3, and this classification has nothing to do with any of these points, so it's an independent random number. And by manipulating the configuration of the clustering algorithm, and again, not touching the clustering algorithm as such, just providing an outside configuration to that algorithm, we could make k-means reproduce exactly the classes that we wanted to have. So we want that point to be classified as 3, and we could make the artificial intelligence exactly give us that result. We wanted to make that point classified as 1, and k-means could be driven into giving us exactly that result, which means that whenever you think artificial intelligence is objective, just to eliminate the human error, be assured that even with a perfectly according to specs implemented algorithm, we can manipulate the configuration of that algorithm from the outside to give you any result that we like. And interestingly enough, the k-means as a very simple algorithm was even harder to manipulate than the much more powerful dbScan algorithm. We took the implementation literally from the specification and didn't touch any of the algorithm. We also didn't touch the data. So we didn't do any privacy infringement, we didn't do any integrity violation, we didn't insert any noise, we didn't insert any bias. It was the original data, the original algorithm. All we had to manipulate is the configuration of it, which is typically never in question because it's all standard. And we could make clustering and k-means give us precisely what we wanted to have as results. Which also questions the objectivity of artificial intelligence in a way. It's very easy to escape these attacks, but the possibility wasn't actually on people's minds, perhaps. Game theoretic security is what I like particular because of its ethical aspects. So I like to distinguish absolute security, which is nobody can attack me, from relative security, because I don't need to be the strongest target, I just need to avoid being the weakest target. And that's why I particularly like if people come up with Macintosh Apple computers next to me, because if anything gets stolen, it's always the Apple. I had a live demo of that typically cynic lesson of mine when I was at a security conference, and we were leaving our computers in the room from the conference and went to breakfast to lunch. And when we came back, all the computers were stolen. Nobody touched the Windows notebooks, nobody touched the Linux notebooks, but all the Apples were gone. That's what I call relative security. Game theory is about making yourself an expensive target. You don't have to be invincible, you just have to be more expensive than somebody else. And one of my favorite authors, Jim Butcher, has actually put it very eloquently, but that's the reason why he writes books and I'm not. He's saying to escape from a bear, you don't have to be running faster than the bear, you just have to run faster than the guy next to you. And also, if you put that game theoretic matters into or security in terms of game theory, That's actually one of a very simple model of capture the flag competition, very much simplified, not exactly what you would have in a real capture the flag, but based on an attack graph, we would say, well, I start off with execution privileges on some machine 0 here, and then I'm working my way down by certain exploits until I get full access to some database server. That actually is convertible into a mathematical game. We have an attacker who tries to work his way down here until the goal, capturing that flag. We have a defender who actually doesn't know where the adversary currently is located, but he or she can set defense actions to push back the adversary from its goal. And depending on your age, you might actually remember that as a board game like Scotland Yard. That's similar how it works, and that actually is convertible into mathematical games for security. And that's what we're doing research on to prevent stealthy intrusions, because contemporary attacks are slow, they are not coincidental, and the typical runtime of a conventional so-called advanced persistent threat is between half a year and 2 years that an attack actually takes. From the first incident of, let's say, social engineering, up to blowing up the whole nuclear power plant. 2 years, 90 days until 2 years. Numbers change depending on sources. So my experience from research in security, again, security is in many ways special, and one thing is there is no long-term accomplishment, or almost no long-term accomplishments in security. Whatever you secure now is going to be broken soon. Whatever you break today is going to be secured in the next version. So be prepared that it's always somebody will always be ahead of you, and you will take over, and that keeps going all the way. Another lesson that I learned also from my own research and from that of others, you should really fall in love with a problem, but never with a tool. I've seen lots of people who actually having 1 or 2 tools that they consider as silver bullets, pretty much doable. I can do everything with that. Artificial intelligence is very prevalent in the media for being such a silver bullet to more or less everything in the moment. A couple of years ago, it was the blockchain. The problem, or my personal view, is I recognize an amateur by the fact that this person uses just one tool for everything. That can be one programming language, that can be one approach to some theoretical problem. The next thing is, if you do security, be supportive, but don't be patronizing. People don't like to get prescribed what to do. You can tell people lots of scary stories, which is nice and entertaining, but you shouldn't actually be telling people you must do something. That's what people actually don't like. What I actually don't like is what people told me about security, and there's a literal quote from a person from the robotics domain: there would be so many good things we could do if it weren't for security to come in all the time. The problem is, robotics is more or less built without any security. So robots are almost, no longer today, but until, let's say, 2 years ago, were being void of any security. Which is particularly nice if you think about surgery robotics. The other question, another very useful question, as simple as it is, can't that be done simpler? In many cases it can, and ingenious solutions are always simple. Everyone can build a complicated solution. The ingenious ones are always simple. That's what makes them beautiful and makes them ingenious. Other thing is, change the perspective. Problems might seem unsolvable if you look at them from a particular angle, but there is a wonderful example of a random number generator that has produced, if you look at it visually, it produces beautiful random numbers, but wait until you slightly change the perspective. That's what the random number generator produces. And that looks great, that looks as it looks. So changing the perspective can really solve lots of problems more than you think. The other thing is that I really wanted to convey here is be passionate about what you do. Even if people don't understand what you do, people will still follow you. So as long as you're passionate about what you do and you're there with energy and drive, it will pull other people along. The other thing is, even no matter how passionate you are about your subject, be prepared that you don't know everything. I have had students who were really having a hard time accepting that simple fact. So they were finishing with their studies and were convinced that whatever I don't know hasn't yet been invented. And it was surprisingly hard to change that mindset. And one particular person along these lines was actually a very extreme case and had committed two of the deadly sins of science. The first is a lack of ethics. The second is a lack of imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. You can gain knowledge, you cannot gain imagination. That's up to you. And that particular person, as just for one example, there was a paper, and that person just was invited as a co-author, took the whole paper, rewrote the whole paper, and then told us, well, since I've rewritten the whole paper, I can publish that under my name alone. Which made us, well, you know, that's technically called stealing, is it? That's what I mean by a lack of ethics. And the lack of imagination is that this person couldn't even imagine that there is something other than she was imagining. So whatever she didn't find out herself must have been wrong, because she would have had she would have had the idea. It's an extreme case, but you will find such people. And since I've already taken over time, I'm very sorry. That's actually it for what I wanted to tell you. And I'm very happy to take questions, but not to take up much more time from the next speaker. Anytime after or now.
Yeah, so if you have questions, we'll come up there with the microphone. And also for the online audience, we'll read the question for you, if there are any. Doesn't look like it. Let's check the online chat.
Everyone's overwhelmed.
Also doesn't look like it. So, oh.
Yeah.
Wait.
So I myself am, like you will hear it later, in the field of cybersecurity, and I think it can be super frustrating sometimes, and you kind of left out this part of really the kind of frustrating part where you work hard on a proof of concept or something, and I know it's about excitement, but how do you deal with this part? What do you think? What motivates you to get over it and to keep on researching, to keep on working on it? So that would be my question for you.
Yes, good question, and thanks that you bring it up. Science is very much a matter of creativity, but I heard lots of people, let's say, not really considering mathematics as a creative subject or computer science as a creative subject. I think the opposite is true. Computer science is an extremely creative subject because you have to come up with new solutions for a problem, and the difference to, let's say, arts. If an artist paints 100 pictures, that person has 100 pictures. If as a programmer you start writing software, you can take 100 trials to write some software or to do something, and you're still there with nothing other than 100 dead ends. What motivates me is the fact that have made the experience that whenever there is one solution not working, there is an infinite number of other solutions that I just have to discover. So the absence of a solution, or the fact that an approach didn't work, is actually doesn't need to be frustrating. What is frustrating is only if you run out of ideas. And unless that happens, you can keep going. Again, you're right. Doing research is in many ways frustrating, and the most, let's say, frequent one is, of course, getting a paper rejected that you have put months of work into, and getting rejected for reasons that you really figure out people haven't even bothered reading that. Well, again, frustrating, but there is plenty of other journals, and even if you just resubmit something, some other person eventually will read it and you will get a good feedback. So the point is, never give up. And but that's actually a personality thing. So I have heard people who actually think they try one solution. If that doesn't work, there is no other solution, which is what I was taking here as a lack of imagination. That's one of the really the sins, not because it's a crime, it's because it will stop you from being creative. So I would say the best thing you can do is believe in yourself and believe in your power of finding one solution, and if that doesn't work, the next solution, and the next, and the next, and the next. And as long as that works, you don't have a problem to keep going.
Perfect. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I'm coming from the hardware side of the part,
Yeah.
and I wanted to ask on how big is the impact of like hardware solutions to problems, as into breaking into stuff, because you said you have done stuff for the government, so I'd imagine there are some hardware exploits. How big is the impact, and have you done some yourself?
Personally, I haven't done hardware exploits myself, but the impact of hardware is incredibly large. First of all, it's a matter if you implement algorithms, you have the very famous side channel attacks on that. So I had one live demonstration where a person was measuring the electric field that's emitted by any such device, running GPG email encryptions in a batch, and from the electromagnetic radiation, finding out which secret key was being used. That's a matter of hardware implementation to prevent that kind of attack. The more, but that's beautiful for a demonstration and scary and everything. But from a practical side, I think the good security really has to use both. It has to use good hardware and has to use the proper software written for it. So I think one cannot be without the other. We cannot solve everything in software as we cannot solve everything in hardware. So the impact of hardware design is not to be underestimated. It's huge. And similarly, as for, let's say, mobile phones, one of the projects that we did for the government was the question whether mobile phones, as you would buy off the shelf, would be eligible for military and government security clearances. Answer is not surprisingly no. But there is lots of hardware design aspects that you can actually bring in to really harden these phones and to establish security in a much higher level than we would have in the civil area. We have several phone vendors that you cannot actually, as a private person, approach to sell phones for governmental and military applications. The phones are lots bigger, look like a bit like we had the big phones, the CNETs in the 1980s. As a side effect, you can even physically beat up the enemy with that phone. But again, it's a field of hardware security. And whenever it comes to really high-level security, there is no way around good hardware. As with quantum crypto, that lives on particular hardware. It's no software or algorithmic solution. It's really fancy hardware that you would need.
All right, thank you. I would say if there are any other questions, just talk to Stefan afterwards at the networking. So,
My pleasure. Thanks.
yep, big round of applause again.
Check. Okay, I hope you can hear me all. Yeah, I see hands up from the top row, and that's the one that would have a problem otherwise. So I guess we can start. Hello, my name is Tobias Höller. I am not a professor, so we are scientifically degrading as we go through the evening. We start with a professor. Now I'm just a postdoc, and then we're academically reducing the level, but hopefully the talks will still be adequate. So who am I? I'm Tobias Höller. I'm a postdoc at the Institute of Networks of Security. So I'm also doing security research. I'm teaching security courses. So I'm coming from that angle, but I'm not going to talk about that very much. So today my topic is more about my free time activity, and that includes I am a founding member of a CTF team called SIGFLAG. That is as much as I'm going to advertisements for SIGFLAG. There is a CTF team at the university. If you're interested about that, talk to me afterwards at the freeform session. And I have been personally participating there in CTF since 2014, and I want to talk a little bit about what CTFs are, how they work, what you can learn from them, what you can't learn from them. First, for those who have never heard of it, a quick description. CTF is short for Capture the Flag, so that part is not surprising. It's a game mode that exists in other things as well. So I think I have played CTFs in computer games long before I played security-related ones. So like the game mode is obviously older, but I think everyone who has ever heard it, it's fairly self-explanatory. You position flags somewhere, and the goal of players is to get those flags. And in a security context, that's very simple. You deploy a website, or you start a server, or you start anything what you want. And then the goal is very simply get some secret information out of there that you are not supposed to get. Very much what we're doing in other situations as well. So what is a security problem? It's very often, hey, by the way, Facebook is losing your email addresses, or someone else is losing your email address, your personal data, whatever else. So the example is fairly realistic. In this case, we are just hunting for flags that are not so relevant to other people, so we avoid the whole legal trouble. One of the big benefits of CTFs, you won't get in any trouble with law enforcement. As a matter of fact, you might actually get hired by law enforcement, but that's something that we'll hear more about in the third talk. Yeah, so our goal is very simple. We access those flags. And that's where we can immediately start wondering about if we are practicing offensive capabilities, we can do those in different kinds. And that's the first thing I would like to quickly talk about. There is different categories of CTFs. There is also a lot of them. So in case you want a reference, the biggest website for them is ctftime.org, and ctftime.org tracks more than 2,000 CTFs since 2011. That's roughly one every weekend. And that's also what you can pretty much play. So if you want to try out CTFs, you can just literally go on ctftime.org, look for upcoming CTFs, and you'll find some for this weekend, for next weekend, for the weekend after that, and so on. So pretty much every Saturday you want to participate in a CTF, you can. So there's a lot of them. Let's start about playing them, and the first ones, and the ones you will play by far the most often, are so-called Jeopardy CTFs. Why Jeopardy? Because it's very simple. You get one question, you answer the question, you get points. So it works very simply. So Jeopardy really works the way you can imagine that. So if you are an organizer, you just come up with something that is insecure, whatever that is. It can be a website, it can be a program that you give people to download and tell them crack it. It can be your new encryption algorithm. If you want to do something like develop your own cryptographic algorithm, I'm sure we all know that that's a great idea. Everyone should roll their own crypto. That's a great idea, and then you can use it as a CTF organizer and then just give it to other CTF teams and tell them, hey, please decrypt it. Even if you think it's not possible, they'll probably manage it, which is one of the fun things about CTFs you can do. Yeah. They're by far the most common. So if you play CTFs, I would say 95 or even more % of all CTFs are Jeopardy CTFs because they're fairly easy to organize, fairly simple to understand, and really easy to participate. So if the organizers put up, for example, 10 tasks, then you can take a look at them, you can take just one of them, you can pick which one. So if you say, for example, okay, there is 9 challenges that look boring, I'm just going to do the one that sounds interesting, and then I can stop. So it's also fairly nice. You can limit your involvement. You can say, I'm going to try for an hour or two, and if it doesn't work, I give up and go away, and I'm happy and fine. So a nice one. But this also is fairly limited in terms of security because it only practices your offensive skills in terms of, there's an example, try and get that secret data. CTFs can actually teach you a lot more than that. So one of my, or honestly my favorite kind of CTF to play are so-called attack-defense scenarios. These are where the organizers actually do something different. Now they actually prepare a network, and then every team that participates gets their own machine and is allowed to deploy that in the network. So at this point, if you have 100 participating teams, you have 100 machines. And then the organizers say, every one of you has to run these services. And obviously those services again have problems. But at this point, you have suddenly 2 jobs to do. Number 1, you want to exploit the services from all the other teams. And number 2, you want to prevent all the other teams from exploiting those services on your own machine. So at this point, the whole defense aspect gets into the game. And at this point, you have to do both. I can tell you there is nothing more stressful than realizing my very system is being exploited right now, and every minute I cannot fix this problem costs me points. It is an experience that you will have if you ever work in incident response. You can actually come into that situation where you are realizing, okay, we are losing data right now, we are losing money right now. In theory, I know what to do, but just the pressure of the situation makes you significantly slower than you otherwise would be. So that's also something to be aware of. You are not necessarily the fastest when you're under so much pressure, which is what I really like about attack defense CTFs, because they give you a much wider range of what you're playing. The biggest downside, there are a lot of work to prepare. So if you want to set up an attack defense CTF as an organizer, you have a lot more work, which has the downside that there's usually fewer of them. Their biggest benefit is they are far, far more competitive, which is why it's very often that like finals or big CTFs are organized in that way. So for example, one of the most competitive capture the flag competitions you can participate is the DEF CON CTF, organized by the security conference DEF CON. Their qualifier is a Jeopardy. It's one of the most frustrating Jeopardy qualifiers you can participate because their challenges are really hard. Their finals on site is an attack defense CTF. So they literally pick some of the world's best CTF teams on the planet. They fly them all into the DEF CON, and at the conference, they keep battling it out in such an attack defense scenario. Because at the end, this scenario really tests significantly more skills than the simple Jeopardy scenario would. And it also gives you far more opportunities to learn. So you can learn a lot of things about how do you respond under pressure, how successful are you, what things work. You also learn things about tooling. Some tools are really nice in practice when you have a lot of time, and the second you don't, you realize, okay, maybe not that great of a tool. And the last category I have here is one that you will almost never play, which are so-called King of the Hill competitions, where you have one system and you know that system can be taken over completely by the teams, and you have the teams like struggle for who can control that one. So if you have ever had scenarios where you realize, okay, there is now multiple hacking teams all wanting to control the same thing. So it usually happens very commonly is if a new vulnerability is released and lots of people want to build their own botnets, then at some point you can tell that the botnets are throwing each other out all the time, and they're like fighting over who gets to actually control a resource. That is what King of the Hill CTFs usually emulate. They are almost never played like for free CTFs, because it turns out they are really not fun, because the good teams kick you out and everyone else is not allowed to do anything anymore. But they are quite regularly organized if you want to like security test your environments, so if you pay teams to participate. So these are usually, there are like competitions where organizations want to test their stuff. So there was a famous one that Tesla did, where they said, here's a Tesla, and for every minute that any team can actually control that Tesla, they got a lot of money, and then such scenarios were existent again. So this is where you're actually gamifying a security audit, more or less, not really something you'll see much otherwise. But I wanted to include it so that my list is complete. Yes, as we've already heard, and therefore no surprise, security is like a weird topic because it integrates with a lot of other topics, and there is a lot of overlap with other ideas, and you always have to wonder about, okay, how does it link to this? How does it link to that? A few obvious ones are that therefore our challenges have to be categorized, and those challenges are very different. So there are people who are really good at, for example, reversing challenges, but very bad at other stuff. So cryptography is one thing. Again, if I give you, here I have my own encryption, please break it, then there are people who are really good at this if they have been dealing with cryptography before. If you've never looked into cryptography before, then you might find those tasks really hard. Then there's things like web security. Web security can get ridiculously complicated. So that is from the very simple, I've written an incredibly insecure website, to, okay, here is one bug in this JavaScript library that triggers in one browser one specific behavior that weakens the sandbox, and there is one known vulnerability that allows you to chain that with 15 other exploits to suddenly do something. So you can make that whole chain arbitrarily complex. And then there's also categories like reverse engineering. Then Poon usually refers to a category where your goal is to actually get code execution somewhere, very often with buffer overflows and these kind of vulnerabilities that are still around. So my Professor Meyerhofer, the head of our institute, is of the stern belief that C is a programming language that should go away and die. And I remember very much that at a talk he said, we all know that every single code we write in C should be fussed and tested extensively, because otherwise it is always going to produce a lot of problems. And I remember I was sitting in the audience and looking around, and I saw a lot of software developers looking at him confounded as to why C code is great. We've been writing it for years and it works, and yes, and we keep having memory buffer overflows. So it's this kind of security flaw that never goes away, which is why CTF challenges always do that. And then we have a few fun categories. Usually then we have other categories that depend on the organizers. So if the organizers are bored, then maybe the organizers know a lot about a specific topic, then they might add something. So I've had CTF challenges where they gave you microphone recordings of CPUs and said, hey, by the way, now tell me which AES key that CPU was using. And then they give you, okay, this CPU, this specific model, this microphone, this is the recording, please figure out the private key or temperature measurements or other side channel attacks. Then there are people who are doing hardware security, and they tell you there we have here the physical mapping of this is the board that was being used, this is how the connections work, this is like the diagram, and these are the electrical inputs, these are the voltages that were applied this and there and there. Please tell me what data was generated there, or what random key was generated there. So there you can have a lot of things depending on where you go. That also very often depends on the organizers. So that enables you to give very specific tasks that are not meant to be solved by everyone, that are meant to be interested for people interested in a specific topic. So that allows you, so it's completely fair to say, okay, I'm just interested in this kind of challenges. I take a look at the CTF, I see if they have something I find interesting. If yes, I do it. If no, I move on, which is also one of the good things. If you are not very competitive, if you want to win everyone, then that is a problem. But don't try to do that alone. So what I wanted to talk about is, what do we learn from CTF? So what did I learn from playing a lot of them? And what is the things that you don't learn? The first thing I learned is they give you an easy and legal way of practicing offensive skills. If you do like training at university, you learn a lot of things, like don't roll your own cryptography. It's one of the things you hear in pretty much every cryptography course. But there's a difference between knowing, okay, it's a bad idea to have my own RSA implementation, and being able to point at someone's RSA implementation and saying, this one's broken. So even if you know it's probably broken, you couldn't actually demonstrate that very easily, because that's usually something, if you've never done it, that does take a little bit of practice or routine. And the same applies to actually a lot of things. So even if you know, okay, this might be a problem, it's not the same as being able, okay, this is a problem and this is how I exploit that problem. So being able to actually exploit problems is a skill that you can learn and that you can practice, and that is one thing where CTFs can really help you. They also get you into a lot of different topics. So in CTFs, you can choose different areas. Am I interested in this? Am I interested in that? And you also have a way of getting into new topics. So I am expecting CTFs, for example, to include a lot more AI challenges in the future. There was a year in 2018 where we had a lot of blockchain challenges. And by the end of that time, we started realizing, okay, that whole blockchain smart contract idea is really stupid, because a lot of things were going wrong, and then we just stopped. So now the whole category has kind of disappeared again. Not sure how we will do that with the AI category, but I wouldn't be surprised. I expect them to start popping up more and more in the next time. Exploiting ChatGPT is already a thing today. So I think Google CTF will be in 2 weeks. I'm curious. I'm expecting them to do quite a bit in that context, but we will see. But yes, we've already solved our first CTF challenges with ChatGPT. And we've already had our first challenges that specifically modified the responses given by ChatGPT by including specific information in there that a user wouldn't see, but ChatGPT would respond to. So we've already been there. Yeah. Do I mention something else? Yeah, a good thing about CTFs is you'll get the solution in the end. So if you've ever tried to practice, I mean, you can obviously just download random programs from the internet and then take a look. Do you think they're secure or not? You can also, not so legally, take a look at random websites on the internet and check whether they are secure. But you'll never get an answer, was that actually secure? And was my way of attacking them actually the right one? Or was there a much easier one? So one of the good things about CTFs is, at the end, usually teams will tell you how they solved them, and then you can read, even if you didn't solve it, did I have the right idea? So, okay, I couldn't do it yet myself, but at least I wanted to do the right thing, which can be a quite satisfying experience, because then you feel like that. And sometimes you'll get other people saying, okay, yes, you could have done it like that, but there was a far easier solution that nobody thought about, which is also quite a satisfying feeling when you realize, okay, I solved it, but it wasn't the only thing. Unfortunately, there are also downsides of CTFs, and we'll see how much more you'll hear about that in the third talk. My personal experience is that CTF challenges do not reflect real-world security problems very well. So usually, they don't actually train you on real-world problems. The reason for that is quite understandable. Real-world security problems aren't really diverse enough to sustain a CTF player base that plays regularly, because it turns out that we keep repeating the same security problems over and over and over again, and repeating the same challenges for CTFs over and over and over again would get the players bored. So very often then you get quite constructed problems like, okay, I need to build something that looks almost good and has just one tiny flaw in them, and problems here and there keep getting more and more artificial, and then some CTFs want to have really hard problems, and then in order to make them really hard, they also have to become more and more unrealistic. So I would not say that it's a very good thing to practice real-world security issues. There are other platforms that do that better. So Hack the Box, for example, is one that is, in my opinion, very, very good at just picking the most common standard security tasks and having one example for every one of those and just summing those up over time. CTFs themselves, probably not that ideal. Yeah. And the other thing that you have to honestly admit, CTFs are meant to play in teams. So yes, you can play them alone, but most of the tasks are designed with the assumption that teams are going to work on that. So many of those tasks are not designed that a single person can very easily solve them. Most of them you can solve on your own, but don't think that you can solve more than one or two for an entire CTF, because that will probably keep you busy the entire time unless you're really quickly. So usually if you want to have like a good position at a CTF, you probably want to be in a team of 5, 6, 7 people, and winning teams are usually 20 people upwards. So it's at some point also a numbers game. If you have more people looking at something, you are way more likely to see the right thing to do. Yes, so that is my very quick summary of what CTFs are, how they work, and what you can learn from them. And since I thought that it's boring to have just a theoretical task, I would like to very quickly, a few more minutes we have, a task that was actually a DEF CON qualifier in 2020 that was turned out in the end quite memorable because we solved it the wrong way, which sometimes happens, which is a really fun thing. But let's quickly go through what happened. So the task sounded really simple in the beginning. They said log into oobash.challenges.oo and run get flag. So we said, yeah, I can do that. Thought, okay, easy enough. So I run get flag, and then I get an error message. There are still 13 logs locked, no flag for me, which made me sad first, because I thought I'd already solved the task, and then I had to wonder, okay, what do I do next? So what is the natural conclusion? if that stupid command isn't doing what I want, I need to figure out what that command get flag is actually trying to do. So I ran the command which get flag, because I was hoping that was a binary. That's what I initially expected. And then I learned, no, it is not. Get flag is actually a shell built in. So what people did is, or what the author of the challenge did is, they actually added a new feature into Bash, then recompiled that, and then installed that on that system. Because this is what DEF CON qualifier people do. They do completely weird things. Yeah, okay. So, can't be helped. So what do? We archive that entire bin bash thing and save it locally, so we can run their weird shell back on our own system and hopefully figure out what's going on. I try and start the thing, and it says, error token not found. So, okay, now that thing doesn't even run locally, so how am I supposed to figure anything out? Well, it sounds like it's looking for a file, and I don't have that file. That makes sense. So, what can we do? Well, thankfully, there are some nice tools that allow us to figure out what a program is doing. One of them is strace, that allows us to trace system calls and just take a look. Are you ever trying to open a file? And if we do that, then we get the information, yeah, we are trying to load etc OOO bash / token. And that tells us, okay, that file has to be on that system, right? And it has to be readable, because that shell is opening and reading it, right? So yes, we do that, and then we base64 it, because it turns out it's just a bunch of random numbers, because that's how cryptographers like to initialize their state, by some random numbers, and then we figured out, okay, that's there. And while I was there, I thought, wait a second, if there is a file, is a folder etc OOO bash, maybe there's something else in there that's interesting. And it turns out, yes, there is. There is a file called flag that also contains some random stuff. And there is a third file called state that also contains some random stuff. So now we have 3 files with random data, which is really beneficial. And in a CTF, that's a good thing. So if we have already 3 files with random data, then we are halfway there, obviously. Here's the bad news. I'm really, really bad at reverse engineering. So that is the point where I actually need help. Thankfully, at our team, we have people who are much better at reading binary code than I am. And those helped me and told me and helped me take a look. Okay, this is the code of what this get flag function is actually trying to do. Note, you already see a reverse engineered C code. And this is very nicely reverse engineered. So if you try to reverse engineer something during a competition, the C code doesn't look that nice. You don't get all the variables properly named and everything. But we take a look, and let's see, can I point? Yes. And then the really interesting line is this one. So line 14 is the interesting one, because that tells us that the flag is apparently AES encrypted, which tells us we are not trying to break the encryption. If they are using standard AES encryption, then I'll assume I need to figure out the key somehow, because the whole breaking AES is something I'll leave to other people. So we realize, okay, what is it doing? It is decrypting that thing. And there is one interesting thing immediately, because we already knew there was a state file, and there is this variable OOO state. So obviously, next thing, what is the whole thing about this state? And then we take a look there, and then we see, yes, we have there some memory set, and then we open that state, and then we read something. And then here we have our funny logs. So this is where the whole, okay, we have those states, and it looks like this state is still depending on some modification, because this is just init state. So we find something else. There is a function that is called unlock lock that actually modifies our state. And that is the interesting one. So since we are already a little bit short on time, I'm trying to very quickly rush through that. If you're not fluent in C, don't feel too bad. You don't really have to read it that well. Very simply, what the idea is, you have to specify a keyword that's top there, and depending on the keyword, the state gets modified. You can specify any keyword. So this is not a password check that says specify the right keyword and you get and you get a part of the state correctly verified, but you just specify keywords, and every keyword modifies your state. And if you specify the right keywords, then you'll end up with a state that actually decrypts our flag at the end. And this is where I was like, okay, now I have to somehow figure out what to do with the state. And then my colleague told me, no, because all the keywords are actually in the binary, which was very nice, I thought. And then at the end, we got our flag. Reversing bash scripts is lame, but reversing bash is neat. So turns out that the author of that challenge thought it was really fun if you had to reverse the entire bash. And we were happy. We had a flag. We were successful. Afterwards, we learned that was not what we were supposed to do. So as I already mentioned, we solved it the wrong way. Why did we solve it the wrong way? Because the challenge author never meant the flag file to be readable. So it was never supposed that we could actually read the files in /etc. Remember the ones we took, like flag, state, and token. So we were not supposed to actually have access to those files. So in his idea was we should have actually used buffer overflows and other attacks to modify the state on the system and force it to unlock itself by jumping into functions and overriding return addresses and doing all the fancy thing, because it is a DEF CON qualifier and they try to do really weird things. But we just read the file and just decrypted it locally, and we had the flag and we were happy. And yes, I mean, they gave us the points, so that was fine. What I would like to emphasize there, and that is the whole thing about perfect security. That's the DEF CON qualifiers. Those people really, really know about security. They wanted to build a system that had just one problem, but they failed. So be aware, it is impossible to build a perfectly secure system, we've heard. It's just as impossible to build a system that has just the one vulnerability you want it to have. So whenever you're deploying something, things tend to go wrong. So the whole security game is one, it's always a best effort. And in this case, we just found the wrong way of actually solving that. That does happen for CTF challenges quite a lot, especially at the more competitive ones. So I think it was the DEF CON, no it wasn't, it was HXP CTF in 2019 that got really famous because they had one challenge, a really hard challenge with the Chrome browser, and the intended solution was one that no team actually found. But some teams were so frustrated that they burned zero-day exploits for Chrome that they'd been sitting on to actually solve the challenge. So the only teams that actually ended up solving that said, fuck it, I know a vulnerability in Chrome that nobody else knows about. With that one, I can solve that stupid challenge because I want my points now. And 3 different zero-day exploits were burned on that stupid CTF challenge on that day, which I find incredibly funny to this day. Again, the author didn't mean this to be breakable like this, but obviously the bare assumption is if you have some unknown vulnerability in a tool like Bash or a Chrome, then suddenly certain challenges get much easier than they were supposed to be. And that is also something that happens there. So the whole thing, trying to train security, be aware flaws are everywhere. Try finding some is a skill that is good. So like developing an eye, okay, what can I do? How can I find something is really useful? That is what CTFs can help you with. What is really hard is actually figuring out what to do. So, and real world security problems are unfortunately quite a bit more boring, but that is both good and bad depending on which perspective you take. If you are in a responding to security incident scenario, then it is sad because you very often respond to the same things multiple times. If you are an attacker, then it's nice because it's very often easier than planned. Okay, sorry for being slightly over time. Let's close at this point.
All right, are there any questions? There's one.
If teams tend to burn zero-day exploits on problems that are unsolvable, wouldn't it be like, aren't there events that just give people something there is no vulnerability known about and just say, solve this, and they just burn zero-day exploits because they become frustrated?
There is a rumor that some challenges are deployed where the author actually thinks there is no vulnerability in there. So it's very hard because usually the teams don't openly admit that. There are CTF competitions where you are invited to attack things where there are no known vulnerabilities at all. That's usually where you pay teams. So if you are like a top playing CTF team, most of them are then so either around universities or around security companies. And there are scenarios where you get invited. So for example, the Tesla competition, that's one where it's an invite only. You invite a couple of really, really good teams and then have them do that. Again, when they burn things like 0 days on something like that, that is unusual, but you have to put yourself in their shoes. That was a 3-day CTF. So this was our 90 of 96 hours. They still hadn't figured out how to do that without their 0 day, but they knew I just have to use that 0 day, and it works immediately. And at some point, frustration kicks in, and you say, I don't care, screw responsible disclosure, let's just do it. And I mean, it was responsibly disclosed because the organizers who figured out that this was a 0 day just didn't publish that for the next couple of months. So we actually did still hold responsible disclosure, but it was still kind of fishy there. But yes, it is done, but usually it is then done for teams who actually have a special financial encouragement.
Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to Martin. If you have any other questions, feel free just to go up to Tobias at the networking session afterwards. I'm sure he's happy to answer all your questions.
Muss ich? Ach so. Right. Hi, everybody. It's so cool to see so many of you. In my talk, I'm going to share a bit of my story within cybersecurity. I'm Martin Dallinger. My story within cybersecurity ranges from being at the European competition. So that's the European Cybersecurity Challenge. I was in the Austrian national team. It ranges to working in the Security Operations Center of Verbund. So that's the biggest energy provider in Austria. And so it was a really cool story, and I think I will share something along the way, which is, of course, not super critical to know, but it was nice, and I learned some things along the way, so I figured I'd share them. So many people ask me how did I start out, and it was really simple. So back in the days where I was still at HTL, so Higher Technical College, I was like messing with an application that a teacher provided to us. So it was very simple. You can see there's just one PHP file. PHP, you don't really need to familiar with it, but it's just an application where you can upload an image essentially. And then you see Munch's interpretation of Kermit the Frog here. And yeah, that's just a demo image. But then a classmate of mine, he actually asked me, what could go wrong if I don't upload an image? What could go wrong if I upload something else? Then we got the idea, I think he even got the glorious idea, to upload a PHP file. So executable code right there in the images directory. So you could then just upload your own code, and yeah, I had no idea about hacking back at the days, so this really gave me the idea about hacking, what it would mean to do something unintended in that regard. So with this new file we just uploaded, we could execute arbitrary code. So the affected person, since the web server was running with all privileges, we could effectively shut down the PC or do worse stuff potentially within our class. So it wasn't really critical, but that's how I got started. So really a coincidence and fun stuff. And so I had a totally different idea of hacking in my mind then. So hacking didn't feel like being in somewhat of a Hollywood movie and doing magic. It felt like working together with other people, doing unintended stuff, doing stuff that is using applications differently, kind of almost abusing applications, but having fun, as Professor already said, being creative here. So that would be my definition, my very informal definition of hacking. Thinking outside the box a bit, being creative, and also having a deep understanding of the systems you're working with, since otherwise you'll have a bad time. It's kind of obvious, but yeah, still. And 2 weeks ago, actually, it happened again. And once you've got a certain amount of intuition with cybersecurity, it becomes obviously easier to fix simple problems. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had an issue. I found an issue of the Machine Learning Institute, where you would submit your processed images, and these images you would dump in a memory file, so a pickle file essentially. And if somebody loads this file, then you could immediately execute every code you want to be executed. So it's really a simple vulnerability, but it really pops in your eye if you had something to do with it. And that's why I encourage you, everybody, to take a look at basic challenges, cybersecurity, so you don't fall into the same traps. This is like really simple stuff. And obviously the exploit of the Machine Learning Institute is now already fixed, so the vulnerability is already patched since I talked to the profs, but still, I don't want you to be trapped there as well. And that's kind of a bit of my mission as well. So the first point of how I got started is now obvious. Then friends got me to former CTFs, like more rather challenges, NATAS, you might know it. It's a great place to get started with web challenges. It's from Over the Wire. They've got cool challenges, and as we already heard today, Hack the Box is also a cool place to get started. And there are also free YouTube channels, of course. John Hammond and Live Overflow provide cool videos. They are in a tutorial fashion, so you can just enjoy them after having lunch or something. Whatever you prefer, really. I love those two guys. They really provide great free content. And then after a while, after I got more involved within the security branch, I would say, a teacher referred me, a teacher back at HTL, IPS, so at the Higher Technical College in IPS, referred me to Cybersecurity Austria. So that's Verboten Gut, and now I'm going to tell you a bit about the Austrian Cybersecurity Challenge. So the Austrian Cybersecurity Challenge is like the national competition in Austria for hacking. It's a big CTF, so they don't only have the CTF, but they also have practice ranges which you can also use to learn something. But essentially, the most part goes for the Austrian Cybersecurity Challenge itself, where you can qualify. Just in the beginning, I wasn't really experienced as well, but I tried my best, and I even almost made it into the finals. So then I was invited into the ECSC qualification. So you for the European Cybersecurity Challenge, that's the ECSC. So you kind of need to perform reasonably well. Then you will get invited to qualify for the next year's European Cybersecurity Challenge. And of course, you can also win prizes, and it's like in a Jeopardy style. So you can pick your challenges, solve your challenges. Like I'm more of a web guy and almost a bit of a reversing guy. So I pick the challenges I like, and sometimes I feel like I try something new, then yeah, sure, pick something else and get your points according to the difficulty of the challenges. The people with the most points get to the finals, and then yeah, you have a chance to win prizes. The finals are this year in Linz, by the way, so that's a benefit, I guess. There are 3 categories. One is the open category, where everybody can participate. Then there's the seniors. Most of us probably in here, I suppose, are in senior. And then there's the junior category. And in ECSC, so for the European competition, you either have to be a junior or a senior, and there can be 5 juniors and 5 seniors in the team. And now a bit about the benefits before I tell you more about the European Cybersecurity Challenge. Regarding the benefits, it's actually super cool that companies really engage with Cybersecurity Austria. I would say they are really intertwined by now. I got to work at Verbund by writing a mail to the head of information security, who I got to kind of know by the fact that he held a presentation to us. So this is super cool. They held a presentation about critical infrastructure, how Verbund deals with attacks, how they deal with managing the security operations center and similar things. So this is also a benefit you will get just by taking part at the qualification, which is super cool. Then also another event from the Center of Excellence was held by Accenture, as you can see in the lower picture here. They were talking about how they struggle with customers sometimes, or what works really well in the field of cybersecurity, and yeah, different topics that are really engaging. So I really encourage you to check it out. And last but not least, from the European Cybersecurity Challenge, the SOC team, so the Security Operations team, Security Operations Center team of Red Bull actually showed us their campus, both in Elspeten and in Fuschl, where the image is taken from. So it's a real honor to see like security, so high security, very relevant people showing you around the campus, and yeah, basically telling you stuff for goodies, and showing you how the security process works as well. Also, yeah, the job opportunities have been highlighted, I guess, by the fact that I've been at Verbund. Yeah, now let's talk about a bit more interesting thing, the European Cybersecurity Challenge. So the qualification is actually going on in parallel. This year's qualification has already been over. The team will be announced soon, so I don't know whether I'm in yet. I guess in this year's team, I've been in last year's team. And the qualification works with write-ups differently from the Austrian Cybersecurity Challenge. So you do your challenges, then you publish write-ups, and then people, so internally you publish the write-ups, then people of Cybersecurity Austria like the way if you fit into the team, if the team really needs you at the European Cybersecurity Challenge. This might not mean that you are not really good, this just means you might not fit in this year. And all over Europe, there are over 17,000 people applying to be in a team. And there's 33 nations participating, including 5 guest teams. So guest teams are, for example, from Canada, from the US, from Israel, and other nations which are not European. But yeah, there's a great variety in there. And it's so cool to be at the competition, which is super, has much variety in the teams, but also has very varied challenges. So the challenges were super different. They ranged from escape rooms. So there was an escape room challenge to wireless hacking, to web hacking, and totally different stuff, which was super cool. You can also check out the GitHub account. You will find the most things on there. So there were 4 exciting days. I'm only going to speak about the relevant 2 for saving time. So that's the Jeopardy day. There was one day where we just played Jeopardy CTFs, like it was structured in like a table. You pick your challenge you want to solve, and then you get the points if you solve it. If you don't solve it, you don't get any points. There are no partial points for half solving a challenge. This doesn't work. So yeah, you kind of have really difficult challenges, since it's the European Cybersecurity Challenge. They don't mess around with simple things. And so you have to have some teamwork going on. Nobody on his own will complete multiple. Well, I've seen a few people, but usually you won't complete multiple of these challenges on your own. And the next day is even more exciting: attack defense. So as we already heard, attack defense challenges are really over the top in form of excitement. You have to play each other, and the cool thing is you play against other nations, right? You see like the Germans are attacking us or something. This is super cool. So, yeah, maybe that sounded a bit wrong now, but yeah, there's also a big element of strategy behind that. Let me talk about the strategies later. I'm gonna cover that later, I think. Who are you going to attack? Because if you attack somebody, they will see your exploit. They will monitor the network, they will defend against you, and they might attack you back. So that's where it really gets interesting. Yeah, that's what it's all about. And on the first day, we've performed, as Team Austria, we've performed quite well, I would say. We were place 7 or 6. And on the second day, we were like place 12 or 33. So I would say good job. And it's really cool to see so much appreciation also from the political side. So our federal president has created a short video, also our federal chancellor. It's like the budget is given by the European Union, and there's like 2 images. The bottom left one really illustrates the room with, so it was in the Messe, Vienna. It's like a huge room with many flags and different people like virtually fighting each other somehow. So it's just a super cool setting, super cool being. And the bottom right image shows me with Clemens hacking on a challenge. Clemens is actually the guy of our team who goes to ICSC, so that's the International Cybersecurity Challenge. It's like 1 level above, whereas there's like 10 people per continent. It's more than the European challenge in some sense. Now let me present you one challenge from the ECSC. Like these, I already said it, they are, I would say they're harder than usual CTF challenges, but not like DEFCON qualifier level. So there was an attack defense challenge called D-Waste. You'll see the theme around here. Like D-Waste, they also had a story behind it. They had like a dystopian future where we didn't, properly cover our waste. There was acid all around the place, and then there was a service created for waste management called D-Waste, and you have to hack this service. You have to attack it, and everybody hosts the same service because it's an attack defense challenge, so you can attack other teams. And essentially there were more than 500 abilities inside the service, and obviously then teams got into certain strategies because the exploits on this service were rather hard. And you can also look it up on GitHub, by the way, as you can see above. So you can really read the code if you want to. And so there's a certain amount of strategy involved based on the difficulty to patch. Maybe I can use this one here. Second then. So we have the difficulty to patch and the difficulty to exploit things. And think about it. If something is easy to patch but hard to exploit, what do? Well, you only attack the bad teams essentially, because so bad teams in the sense of you don't want these, you think the teams are not going to patch it, or you think the teams, they're not going to get it, that they are being exploited. And if you've got something hard to patch and hard to exploit, you might as well just attack everybody and not patch it yourself, because other people might not be able to attack you because it's hard to exploit, right? So there's a lot of strategy involved with attack defense, and on the European level we also kind of prioritized this strategy element. Now to the tools, which I think are super cool. There's a tool called Tulip. I personally know their author now. He's Rick from Team Netherlands. He created this tool to like have a really cool overview of when you're losing flags. So when somebody attacks you, you can create your own rules in some sense to there are Suricata rules. Some of you might know it. So you can build kind of a traffic filter to flag traffic and to easily identify where am I losing flags, who is attacking me. And this is not only based on string matching, but you can make this arbitrarily smart, I would say. And then there's also another tool which we used. It was called Archime. If somebody of you knows Wireshark, so that's also a network filter, then it's just Wireshark on steroids, I would say. So this is just a really smart network filter you can have in front of your server. And it's very similar. This is very similar to what SOC people actually do, but they have Archime on steroids. So it's like Wireshark on steroids, like stacked. They have automatic detections, but it's like a layer before that. So we are really getting to a realistic example here in essence. So if somebody of you has tried CTFs before, and if somebody is struggling, I will give you a few tips still. Think backwards. So think, where is the flag? How do I get there in the easiest way and not search for stuff you might do now? It might help you sometimes. Get to know a few tools, know your tools very well. but also be open with new tools, because as we've already heard today, being stuck to your tools is not cool. And try to see the bigger picture. Maybe there's another service running which you haven't considered now, which also has something to do with your service. And I would say a certain amount of frustration is normal when playing CTFs. So as we've already heard today, just keep on exploring the solution space. Talk to others of your team, maybe if they've got another idea. Never give up, keep on moving. And then, like this, now transitioning to working in cybersecurity, which has been super different for me, believe it or not, from really cool competitions. Obviously, cybersecurity is more than just hacking. You need to take into account regulations and best practices, especially if you're working with critical infrastructure. So there are EU regulations and federal regulations you have to spend attention on, you have to abide by, and this really gets complicated, and you have to have experts in your teams once you do that, for conducting audits, for regularly checking if systems are like not beyond the patch level and stuff, for regularly scanning your own systems for having vulnerabilities and similar things. You constantly have to keep up to date. So cybersecurity is really not the field where you can have your doctor or something and then lean back and enjoy. You know everything, right? No, that doesn't work this way. You can also do research on your own, especially in the context of critical infrastructure, OT devices. So OT is operational technology. OT is about, so in context to IT is like, yeah, oversimplified a bit, but a laptop would be IT device, so where humans work with it, but an OT device is for machines, much rather. So OT devices are like for turbines, for more critical stuff. OT devices are PLCs. Yeah. So in this field, there's not been a lot of research, I would say, in comparison to IT. So you can do lots and lots of research on your own, like the Verbund team did, and they've shown some great results and even published their own CVEs, which is cool. And also you have to take into account an immense amount of complexity. Right, now let's talk a bit. Right, this one has gone black here, but I think it's fine. Now let's talk about security operation centers. A security operation center is like the place you have to detect, prevent, and respond to threats. It's more of a concept than a real place. So you have to make sure, or you have to know that you cannot defend against everything. Some exploiters or some attackers might leak through your barriers, your layered securities, and you have to be able to respond to these threats as well. You have to have streamlined processes. Like, I'll give you an example to make it more graspable. Someone receives some sort of email. He opens the attachment. There's some sort of Excel file. He decrypts the zip archive. There's some sort of Excel file. He opens it, enables macros, and now he has some piece of ransomware. Hopefully it is noticed. Otherwise you have an even bigger problem. But you have to know, you have to have run books. What do you do next? I'm not sure if this is required by regulation, but I'm pretty sure everyone should have a run book. What do we do in this very special case? What do we do if somebody has like ransomware locally? What do we do in case of a breach, not only within an abstract breach, so some breach, but within this breach, and really be concrete about this. And the Security Operations Center is also really cool because you've got, you need to have lots and lots of data to make decisions about the state of your company currently. To make somehow you need to state, we've already heard today that advanced persistent threats somehow can stay unnoticed for 2 years. So you really want, especially in the field of critical infrastructure, you want to know, is there something within my network going on? So you need lots of events. Verbund actually has billions of events, at least as stated on the public slides. They have billions of events per week. So this is, now I can actually transition on the next slide. They have billions of events per week. So this is massive a massive amount of data to process, obviously, but also you need loads and loads of rules to tune it down to only see the relevant things. Which is also super tough, seeing the relevant things. What do you define as relevant? Somebody changed the password is not always relevant, right? So I would say there are super high stakes because energy providers are by definition an attractive target. They've got the power, lol. Sorry, bad pun. Yeah, in some sense. And there's also laws demanding a lot of security. Like compliance you have to check regularly, which is also good to have these laws, since otherwise security would also only be seen as it costs money, and nobody would care about it, probably, or only assert to a less amount. So in Austria we have the Netz- und Informationssystemsicherheitsgesetz, the NISG, and the Austrian Program for Critical Infrastructure Protection. The NISG is a bit more about reporting in some sense. So if a bad thing happens and in some sort of control center, for example, somebody loses control, or so he can't control the flow of a river or something, it has to be reported. On the Danube, for example, with regards to Verbund, this is just in this law. And Austrian Program for Critical Infrastructure Protection is just a bit more general. It's not. It's got a bit more of a wider definition of critical infrastructure, I would say. Of course, I already told you about the IT and OT mixture. So OT, you need your own experts. There's a lot of stuff to research there, which has not been explored yet, and it seems a bit older, in some sense. Yes, that's the things. And also, yeah, talking about research, Verbund has actually created their own research container. You can watch the public video here. Like it's called the OT Cybersecurity Lab. They've put it at a power plant to test hardware in cooperation with other universities, with other research partners, which is super cool in my opinion, since you can really grasp the opportunity to get new exploits there and to actually publish them in a safe way. Yeah, this is I would say the step in the right direction. And now I think a few things to keep in mind for the end of the presentation. Security always is in a constant war with privacy in companies, I would say, since somehow you want your employees to feel like they've got the right privacy, but you also need billions of events per week in order to establish the knowledge you need, in order to have a good view on your company. You need to really make sure to get the right ones and to have a good trade-off in that sense. Neat tricks I've seen across multiple companies now is that to watch similar registered DNS names, that's cool, I think. If somebody registers a domain, like I have the company comp, and somebody registers a comp with N instead of an M, so the 2 N's, then I will be notified and I could even block this new domain automatically. So this is quite cool trick. Big companies also use internal phishing campaigns, which is also really common right now. You might not be aware of it. So you just send phishing mails to employees, to many employees usually, a subset, quite big subset, and you don't actually tell who fell into the trick, so who got caught, but you only tell these people that, hey, you made something wrong right there. So it remains in an ethical manner, and I think that's really cool to increase the awareness within the company. Last but not least, another cool trick which I wanted to mention is honeypots. Honeypots are just servers in your network you set up, or servers or files or other things, services, whatever you set up, just to see if somebody interacts with them in some way. And if somebody interacts with them, you know somebody has triggered a honeypot. Somebody did something only an attacker would do, in some sense. In the case of having like security with companies, I would say the most important thing is awareness, since, as we already heard today in the beginning, the employee is usually the easiest way in and not some software. So like social engineering and other phishing campaigns are like the easiest path usually than spending a few zero-day exploits. You have to be you have to be up for both, obviously, but awareness makes it much easier for you. And knowing your tools, having good detections and the know-how, that's like the gold standard I've learned at Verbund. So that's like the thing you really want. And if everything works out perfectly, then you're happy and you can really state that my network is more secure than no, it's not more secure than it has to be, but it has good security in some sense. All right, are there any questions yet? I think we are so much over time, I don't want to pull the Menti quiz up now.
It's fine. We have time for like 1 or 2 questions.
All right.
So.
In the attack and defense competitions you spoke about earlier, I'm still the different teams attacking each other. I'm still kind of imagining it like it's portrayed in Hollywood, where it's more like a type racer challenge, where whoever types the fastest wins, or whoever wears the coolest mask or has the most tabs open. I assume that's not the case. So my question is there really any cost to attacking a different team? So if you found an exploit, why not just use it against all of the other teams?
Yes, in some sense, all of the other teams may then use the exploit as well. They may also gain points. You want to be ahead in some sense of the other teams. So if the other teams, if you only attack the bad teams with some sort of exploit, then you can, so bad teams by defining it yourself, then you have some sort of a guarantee, or you think a low probability that they will then attack you back, or they will use your exploit to attack others and therefore gain points, therefore being closer to you in the scoring, in the final scoreboard.
Okay, so it's not about like wasting computing resources to
No,
create a password. It's more like a strategic play to.
It's strategic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So these were a few strategies you usually use in attack defense challenges. And Team Germany has done so super successfully, because we saw them gaining so many points, and we were like, how does it work? I'm not getting an exploit. Am I not seeing something? But the people of Team Germany later explained, yeah, we weren't attacking you because you would have seen it. So, yeah, they really have some strategy in the gameplay, I would say.
Any other questions? Then I would just raise one myself. What did you enjoy more? The challenges or the working in security?
Oh, great question, actually. That's a tough one, I would say. Like, if I would do challenges every day, then it would become boring rather quickly, I would say. So I think that it's a good mix. But for the time being, I mean, ECSC was really cool. But working at Verbund, I got loads and loads of cool knowledge. And you can always, you always have your experts, really experts, I would say, next to you who know their stuff, and you can always ask them to get some insights. And I think in the long term, probably things like companies, Verbund, similar things. But in the short term, such competitions are awesome, and regularly doing it, I can only recommend this.
Thank you. So big round of applause again for Martin.
Thanks.
So again, I want to say a big thank you to all of our speakers, and also for all of you for joining us. And we prepared a few snacks and drinks, so just stay a few more minutes with us, ask your questions, and enjoy the evening. Thank you.